Sunday, I'm not sure whether perhaps you can mobilize the same thing on the mines. I don't know. It's really targeting individuals and putting the fear of violence in them that's going to be most effective. The other tactic, of course, was the earlier strike, which was very widespread and long and effective as a labor action, except that the labor leaders, as you talked about, got exposed. And I suppose my question there would be, would it have been, or is it possible to organize that kind of strike with the leaders being invisible? With the benefit of hindsight, keeping away from the courts, etc., and organizing an informal strike like that.
John Apolis.
Thank you. Just got two basic questions. What informs this division between the permanents and the casuals in the workplace? Is it also a reflection in terms of divisions around where the casuals and the permanents are residing? So I just want to get a more kind of detailed insight into this division between the permanents and the casuals, and the inability or the reluctance on the part of the permanents to relate or even assist in the organizing of the casuals. And also the second one related to that is, to what extent the communication workers union played a role in either entrenching these divisions or, I don't know, just to elaborating on that issue of the union's role. Because communication workers union has quite a long history of militant battle within the post office. So if you can also explain why this union lost the ground in the post office. Yeah.
Thanks, John. Andres, there was a certain urgency in your body language just now. Do you want to make a quick comment? Yeah. Because I'm giving you 2 bites, which is very unfair.
I think you're very good.
So thanks for the second bite, Jackie. It is kind of urgent. It's a point about theory, and that theory is not for the academic journals necessarily. The point Carl makes about the home visits, I think it's really important if we link it to Melanie's point about space. That's in the literature on the struggles of casual workers, Jennifer Chung, others who've written on this, Justice for Janitors, organizing golf caddies in Korea. It works when you target the primary employer and you take the struggle out of the workplace and onto the social landscape. You go to the board meetings of the organizations where the decisions are made. And it's interesting that the workers, by not reading that literature, actually followed very, very similar strategies to all the other contingent worker struggles. So I find that really, really fascinating.
Thanks, Andres. David.
Thanks, Andres, which just shows that we're completely redundant because people will do what they need to do without us. But okay, so super. Really, thank you very much. These are really helpful comments and questions, and I'll do my best. In terms of a Chapter 9 institution, I'm not sure if that was a serious suggestion. I mean, my answer is no. The title of this presentation is Fighting Their Own Battles. I refer to Carl's really good talk that he gave earlier in the week, and I hope he's going to put it out in a publication. The constitutional settlement of 1994 or 1995, depends where you take it, has collapsed. It's not working. This is just one case study of where it's not working. So if the superstructure is not working, don't put another weight on top of it. Yes, we've got to actually realise there's a major rupture taking place in this country. This is just one small part of it. So we have to rethink about this. So some kind of body of the great and the good that we can have these lovely, well-paid positions on to monitor what the plebs are doing down there. I'd be really crude about it. No, that's not what I'm saying. I think that people should organise themselves. And that relates both in terms of formal trade unions, I'll come to the point that was raised, and to the government, or the sort of the big structure of government, where it's the legal system and its attended operations. Melanie, the Metro Rail is a huge part of this story, and some things I can't reveal. But basically, the Metro Rail was the transport method that was used. And then you combine it with whether there are cameras in place, whether you, as I've mentioned already, whether you've got particular white suburbs, and these other factors, and then you can actually look at the geography of the tactics around that. Remember, these guys are completely broke before the strike even starts. Yes? And so transport was a major issue, and metro rail is by far the cheapest form of transport available. Yes, and thanks for the other comments around the ways of looking at this. And you know, all workplaces get Byzantine in the number of positions they do, but when they're linked to money, and this is all about money, of course, you know, that's when it gets tense. What about the history of these? Well, you know, there's a lot of people here that went through it, but it's to be so here. To be so, do you want to say something? And it's a very big question about, you know, the question was, what is it about you guys that allowed you to organise so successfully in this particular process?
Thank you very much, David. What made us to be successful in this is that it's the division that was between the casuals and the labour brokers. Is that we find that a permanent is earning 4 times what you are earning. You don't have benefits, you've got nothing. As and when the employer decides that they don't need you, they will just get rid of you. So it is the slavery that we're at. There was this type of operation that they would use, especially on the permanent, that if ever there is a lot of job, they would give it to the casuals. So we were so oppressed that we got to realize that we need to get out of this. And most of us, it was young people like us. So we looked into, most of us are not able to go to schools, to universities and all those things. So the only thing is to make sure that we create a better future for ourselves in the post office, because within the post office you are able to uplift yourself, you've got all the possibilities of bursaries and becoming a better person. So it is the thing that has inspired us that we get to run so successfully. That's it.
Thanks to be so. In terms of, Carl, I've talked about the Constitution, I've made my views quite clear on that. In terms of the Hodzoma didn't work, I disagree. It didn't work in itself, but when the guys came to the home visits, these guys knew that they'd be putting people in ICU units. So if you just arrived at a house, you end up as like a peaceful demonstration. It's a bit embarrassing because the neighbours see that, you know, you're stigmatised. The metro cops keep control, and nothing happens. But if you've been out in the townships imposing corporal punishment, let's put it that way, you get a visit. It's a completely different story. By the way, the Mabarete, where did that name came from? There's arguments about exactly how it did, but it's Becky Selling. Tactical response unit in the townships. Paramilitary policing unit that came into the townships under his initiative about 4 or 5 years ago. And if you were in the townships, the way they operated was corporal punishment. If they caught you infringing anything, it was corporal punishment or humiliation, you know, crawling through sewage in the townships and this kind of thing. And they would nickname the barians, because they were barians. And it was around the same time, people saw the parallels, and the Mabarete took the name on. So, you know, it's an interesting thing about violence in the society. It's not restricted to the underdogs, you know. John, on this issue of the sort of the difference, Tabiso in a way has raised an important point. One of the differences was age. Because this was put in as a cut-off for new appointments, those that were casuals were younger. I think that's quite significant. And those that were permanents were older. And of course there's an immediate economic difference because there's a 4 times difference in salaries. But actually they're all from the same socio-economic condition. These are living in the same streets in the township. It leads to incredibly tense relationships that went on. But otherwise, you know, these guys were exactly the same, other than some are younger and they are unfortunate that there's cut off and they don't get in. So there is more to that. But, the tech coup. Look, it lost. This is my view, and you know, I've talked to a couple of coup people, but I would love to talk to more. They completely lost the plot. You know, they destroyed their dominant position by allowing labour brokers to continue without unionisation. So what you've got is these groups emerging. Now, to be honest, it's hard not to see this as corrupt. You know, the best you can say is that they were asleep. Because every time that a permanent was replaced by a casual worker, they lost a member. And there's no subscription. So they're undermining their own financial base each time the longer they allow this to do. So, it's hard not to think that there weren't kickbacks going on. I mean, there's huge amounts of smoke around the corruption in this area. Exactly who's involved, will probably come out in the courts at some point to a degree. There's massive amounts of money at play here. But there's lots of other explanations. So I'll just run through them very quickly. Koo was obsessed with the threat from SWOP, which was the splinter union that had started in 2009 but wasn't recognised by the Post Office in 2012, and they fought them through the courts, they fought them through the IR system of the Post Office. So they were on being taken over by another conventional union, when in fact the biggest threat came from the casuals. Koo is dominated by telecom workers, because it spreads across, and telecom workers tend to be more highly educated, so they took the dominant positions. So the issues of casual workers within the Post Office, which is a poorer relation within Koo as a whole, got pushed down. And there's many other reasons as well. It's a fascinating study as to how a union allows that to happen, and ultimately destroys itself as from a monopoly position to one of a competing set. The home visits I've talked about, but thank you for the issue of this idea of this space and moving around. Okay.
People, our breakfast is waiting, so let's have one more round of comments or questions. Ben?
Yeah, I'll just have a quick one. There's a lot of interesting things coming out of this, but one thing you haven't commented on at all is you talked about the guys, all the picture of the guys, most of the people here are guys. Are all of the casual workers men? There's obviously a specific type of tactic, but that's my question.
My question is the future of the post office. People have lost confidence in the post office due to the strikes. Is this going to have a permanent effect on the post office as a viable business? That's my question.
I don't want breakfast.
Right.
That's easy.
People are hungry. Okay.
So, quick questions. So, gender, yeah, really important point. It's like so obvious, I think presented. This was male. Not exclusively male, and I made a real effort to go out and find some of the small handful of female women, Mabarete. But this links to what they were doing. I mean, Georgie's here, he can tell you, because he told me, the first time they go out and start doing the Hotsoma techniques, the women get sent back home, because they're not up to it. So, this is a highly gendered workplace. This is a highly gendered struggle, and we can engage with that. Partly because of the nature of what was going on, and partly a reflection of the society from which these workers are drawn. What I think is more interesting now, because actually the post office workforce as a whole is quite feminised, not amongst postal workers but amongst sorters in the mail centres, is how the challenges of the legacy unions are in terms of working with with women, and that's it. And I should say that there was a point there that I omitted to talk about. What I try and grapple with in the paper is the question of should you unionise or not. So Carl, you did ask this question, I forgot to answer it. No, the worker committees allow you strategies that are completely impossible as unions. On the other hand, being a union allows you to do things that are completely impossible as casuals. So, so in the Mabarete, which have migrated to become DePaco, what's interesting here, I can't point like this, but if you look at that DePaco logo, there's the number 294 located in it. So it's kind of a historical legacy. This is the workers' committee that we came out of, but we're now a union that's registered with the Department of Labour, and we're recognised by. And we can have debates. Did they do that too quickly, too late? And they're still struggling with that transition. And that's my current engagement with them, is trying to work through that on that. The future of the post office. Look, I've said in my articles, I say in this, that the idea that the post office is finished because of new technology is wrong. I actually think that, and as I've said about the townships in particular, for decades there's going to be a major use of conventional post office services. And further, you can look abroad at post offices like in Germany and so on. There's no reason why post offices should not remain a very important national institution, albeit with a shifting service profile, because letters are going to disappear, yes, but parcels are not, for example. And there's the fact that you have this enormous footprint across the country, these points of services. No one else has as many post offices or points as anybody else. There's all sorts of things you can do with them. You know, like we could have paid our e-tolls with them, you know, for example, by those that pay e-tolls. But they're points of service. So I do think the strikes clearly have done that. The point I just want to make, because I know Jack wants to have breakfast, is that this industrial relations nightmare will not end. And by end, I mean get to a normal situation of normal strikes and normal disputes, because we know industrial relations, you know, are normal, until the legacy of the labour brokers is put to bed forever. And that means that all workers who do equal work have to be on equal conditions. And until you do that, you're going to have this awful dynamic that's going to drive conflict, you know, and the legacy of it.
Thank you, David. Comrades, I think this has been a really remarkable event, because I think it illustrates how SWOP is not only doing really important research, which helps us understand what's happening in our society, but we do that research not on people, but with people. So it's been fantastic to see a mix of the post office workers here and academics and other people from the wider society. That's really terrific. And I would urge the people from the post office to give your email addresses to our administrators.